The self-actualized individual knows their purpose, they have their people, and they have a place of service. Self-actualization in of itself is merely a stepping stone towards self-transcendence. When you've truly actualized, you exit the hermit mode, which is what we discussed in part 1, and you enter into a stage of kingship or queenship, a stage of rulership. Fundamentally, that's what you do. You go from the inner turn to the outer gift. Self-actualization becomes self-transcendence when you lose yourself in service of something beyond yourself. Because otherwise we're just looking at our belly buttons and we're looking into our imagination and we're imagining and fantasizing and visualizing and building our muscles, building our money, building our whatever it might be. It's all about you in the first stage of self-actualization. We covered this in the previous video. It's 20 minutes of exploring hermit mode. Go watch that one before you watch this one. If you haven't seen it already, you'll see it right there on the channel, self-actualization, hermit mode. If you've accomplished your hermit mode goals, you've spent your 3, 4, 5, 10 years in hermit mode, you will feel the inner call towards rulership. Archetypally speaking, you'll enter into king psychology or queen psychology. You won't become a king. You aren't suddenly a queen, and I'm not going to shout and celebrate you in an overly narcissistic, self-congratulatory way. You enter into true rulership consciousness. If you study any archetypal psychology, good archetypal psychology, not these fluffy self-development, how to become more of a queen, you go girl kind of books, which is usually about the queen knows what she wants, she's self-indulgent and she's not afraid to take what's hers. Yes, that's what the tyrant queen does. Actual queens in actual history, they serve their queendom. Queen Elizabeth, God bless her soul. She's not with us anymore. She died a few years ago. Look at the impact of her rulership in a literal historical sense over the 70 years, I believe, of her reign. You may have your opinions around the monarchy. Just withhold that for a moment. I'm British. I can't help but bring up the Queen. What can I do about it? Look at other queens and empresses throughout history. The queens who served themselves purely for themselves were not very good queens, and neither were the kings that did the same. No man aims towards being a selfish king. He dreams of being the king who rules the people into battle to fight a noble cause, and maybe he dies on the battlefield, but his kingdom lives on. That's the innermost dream of the archetypal man. You are a steward, a custodian, somebody who advances a mission, advances a cause, and you look after your people, even if not on the battlefields or the trenches. You're the king in your family. You do something for them. You are someone for them. You become that man for your children, for your partner, for your people. Here we go. The purpose, the people, the place of service. Kingly and queenly consciousness is the second stage of self-actualization because the self needs to disappear if it's going to achieve self-realization or self-transcendence. In the hermit mode stage of self-actualization, it's completely appropriate to spend years looking at your trauma, to spend years visualizing your future, and really be in that fundamentally inwards-facing state. But there's more. And the majority of life should be spent, from my biased opinion, in the externalized stage of self-actualization. Let's imagine that a 30-year-old suddenly switches on to the idea of self-development and self-healing. They spend 5 years, they're 35. They spend 10 years, they're 40. I want them in their 40s to switch over into kingship, queenship, rulership, the archetypal realm of giving back and looking after their people. It doesn't mean that they're black and white. Again, I explained this in a previous video. Just because you're in hermit mode doesn't mean that you've literally cut off all connections. But you're detached from the situations that you're in. You're at the family gathering, and guess what? You're thinking about one of the psychology books I held up in that video, like Saint Teresa of Avila's Interior Castle, or the other book that I held up in that video, Our Inner Conflicts by Karen Horney from 1945 and the 1500s retrospectively. Or respectively. You're thinking about these books when you're in the family gatherings, when you're in hermit mode, because your psychology is fundamentally tilted inwards. You invert the same situation when you're in the later stage of self-actualization. The self-actualizing individual enjoys going with the people, because they have something to give. And this means that you can be very engaged in the conversations in the generative service. This is why business is going to be one of the major themes that we focus on in this video. You enjoy being in these situations, but you're listening with the third ear, you're looking with the third eye, analogously and metaphorically speaking, you're doing these things, or maybe literally speaking, if you're a bit of a mystic. You might be if you're interested in hermit mode, maybe you do literally have a third eye perception. I'll leave that up to you. You're out in the world, but you still have contact with your inner world because you spent those 3, 5, 10 years building that muscle of interior vision, building that ability to connect with yourself in the future, look back in your past and work along the timeline. As I mentioned in another video, I think on the inner child healing concept, you have a thread through your heart from your first breath to your last breath. From cradle to crypt, you have worked along that timeline of identity. And the larger portion of your identity looking forwards is to give back to the people. How do you do this practically? That's up to you. If you haven't figured it out just yet, you're probably still in hermit mode. Hermit mode isn't something which extends all the way through. And it's not something that gets to a full completion point. But the surest sign that you're ready to exit out of your cave is that you have a pretty clear vision of your purpose, your people, and your place of service. That could just be family. That could just be a deep romantic relationship or a relationship with God, a spiritual commitment, but you're ready to devote yourself to something. That's the principal idea. You're not afraid of commitment. You have a devotional energy about you. Doesn't need to be purely in a romantic context. There are some people who are self-actualizing individuals who never even enter into romantic relationships. But you're externalizing. True king consciousness, true queen consciousness is that they are a placeholder. They're a custodian. They're a role. It's not about the man or the woman wearing the crown. In many traditions, some people even change their names. They just become an extension. Even you think about the popes arguably in a kingly position. It's a priestly, kingly, spiritual king, and they change their names to become Pope so-and-so, Pope so-and-so. It's not their original name. There's Eastern traditions that do the same thing. People get a whole new name for a whole new role. This indicates something about the people that you're there to serve. People must be served by someone who is more than just a person themselves. They must be in dedication and commitment to something which is greater than the individual. Otherwise, it's just guru worship for the sake of guru worship. You're just idolizing some man or some woman. But a truly, rulerly, archetypally powerful individual takes that light, takes all of that attention, and they shift it somewhere else. They're okay being in the spotlight. They're okay taking up attention, but they point their people somewhere else. They do something for their people. It's not about them. They might receive some of the glory. They might receive the praise. The history books might remember their names and their deeds and not the 10,000 soldiers in the battlefield. It's about the victory of King so-and-so. Or it's about the great period of prosperity and agricultural revolution of Queen so-and-so, Empress so-and-so. They're remembered in history, but the people are serving a community goal. For me personally, this means that you need to practically, at this next stage of self-actualization, you need to practically take a deep commitment to a line of work, or at the very least to your family. I don't believe that someone can be truly self-actualizing. I'll pause and say this, because this is a big claim I might be making. Do I believe this? I don't know. I'm 99% sure that what I'm about to say is true. I don't believe that somebody can be a truly self-actualized individual if they haven't done something good for somebody else. A significant good, and ideally for many somebodies. Even somebody like Saint Teresa, who lived a largely interior life, mystical woman of the Christian tradition. She wrote books. She wrote this book, she did services. She's still fundamentally inwards. I don't know if that's the best historical example. I'm gonna stay with it. Even the most introverted, writerly artistic type, they better produce something to make the world better. You better create something with all of that high consciousness that leaves a high consciousness impression. That's at the most extreme end. There's no such thing, in my opinion, as the self-actualized individual who didn't leave an impression, who didn't make a soul connection, who didn't offer a gift. Actualized energy is creative energy, it's productive, it's generative, it's life-giving. It shouldn't just all be about yourself. Don't just keep it all in here. It should go somewhere. That's on the extreme end of introversion, the artistic type who spends 50 years writing a book and then it's recovered after they... Whatever, that's the fantasy. Let's not focus there. I can't even talk to it accurately. See how I stumble a little bit? It's because I don't believe that that's the best way to do this. What I believe is at the very least you build families of consciousness. You have your literal family, your biological family, maybe you get married, maybe you have children, maybe just the family of your acquaintances that you were born into, your parents, your brothers and sisters. You've got that family. You've then got the wider family of your community, your literal neighborhood, but also if you're somebody who does business, if you're somebody who's entrepreneurial or has any kind of degree of networking that's a bit more personable, you have a work family. You have a family of colleagues, and it's your responsibility in that second stage of self-actualization to be generative. Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette in the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, they talk about this idea of the king giving blessings. And that idea is truly the central note of this entire concept. The king gives blessings to his people, and the blessing might be a nod, it might be a gesture, it might be a firm handshake. It could be a gift, but he gives a gift of energy to somebody who's lacking. He gives a sense of hope to somebody who's in need. The Queen does the exact same thing. If you're following philosophies and archetypal psychologies that make the kingly or queenly consciousness about self-congratulation and being on the throne with the scepter and the crown or having your leopard skin mantle, it's not the thing. The fine furs, the gold, the throne room, the slave boys or slave girls, whatever your thing might be, that's not the thing. It doesn't serve anyone but you. Self-actualized energy. Pay attention right there. It's obvious that that's trivial. It's obvious that the slave boys and slave girls are a lower form of gratification. But to what degree does a false extension of hermit mode, where you have all of that energy, all of that power, all of those great ideas, all of this health, to what degree do you become kind of like inner slave boy, inner slave girl? You're entering into this very strange concept of I'm superior and yet at the same time I'm clearly too inferior to actually make connections with the outer world. Just watch out for it. I'm not trying to shame anyone. If you're reacting to that, it could be that you're genuinely still in hermit mode. But at a certain point, it's about building blessings. Buildings of blessings, perhaps, but building that habit of giving blessings to your people, to your family, and that's the world of service. For me personally, I have a business, I have an entrepreneurial endeavor, let's call it, which is about helping. Fundamentally, it's about helping. I try and give free resources on this YouTube channel. When I'm working with my paid clients, I try and give as much as I can. Of course, I receive financial compensation in paid situations, but the outwards giving energy, truly, by my intention, is more than that which I receive in return. Otherwise, I wouldn't spend 20 hours plus per week doing free YouTube videos for years. I wouldn't spend all this time doing all of this, would I? No, I would. Because where is the true sacrifice? This is where you go to the next level. I'm financially compensated in paid work. I'm also compensated energetically for free work. Because I gain from this. I self-actualize and I build my service through giving. You look at any of the great men and women throughout history, they were givers. They had love, they had vision, and they gave. They might have spoken it into existence, they may have done great works in the world, they may have been fantastic artists, but they gave a gift to humanity, and all we have in this one life, in this short period of time on earth, is the opportunity to create and to give and to connect in the highest, most authentic, most inspired way that we can. If we've spent those 5 to 10 years in hermit mode, healing the trauma of the past, doing genuine introspective work to be able to see a vision for our personal and collective future, the game of life and the dance of life is enjoying that, surely, for as many decades as you can. That's the gift of the self-actualized individual, the self-actualized man or woman who becomes self-transcendental, who loses their identity, who loses their mature ego archetype in something greater. I don't know what that will be for you. If you haven't shifted your work life, you don't have to become a coach or a teacher or a therapist. You don't have to do it in that way. But if you haven't shifted your career to be more authentically impactful, more conscious, at the very least, more intentional, something like this, the language fails me at this moment. It's intangible. If you haven't shifted your path to just be on that better trajectory for the next decades ahead, make that move sooner rather than later, because it's not just you who's going to lose out. It's dozens or hundreds or thousands of people that won't benefit from the ripples that you put out into the world. If you're playing small and you're prolonging the hermit mode and you know that it's time to take up the responsibility, to put the burden on your shoulder, to carry some weight, to take on some debt, go and do it. It's so worth it. You find your purpose. You fulfill your purpose with your people. And your people and your purpose are all enmeshed together in your place of service. If the first stage of the hermit mode is all about you, the second stage of self-actualization, it's all about them. It's all about them. It's all about you. That's the whole idea. If you haven't seen the first video, you can watch that on the screen right now. Otherwise, I recommend that you go and do some work in the world. As you, for others.